Reconvening, we've got Parking Authority up next, joined by Councilman Robert Stokes from the 12th District, Councilman Ryan Dorsey from the 3rd, Councilman Brandon Scott from the 2nd,
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Vice President of the City Council, Councilwoman Sharon Green Middleton from the 6th District, Councilman Bill Henry from the 4th District. Parking Authority, we have you slated for 1 hour. Director Little, if you could introduce the folks on your team and then keep your presentation somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 to 15 minutes. That would be greatly appreciated. And then we'll take questions from the council.
Certainly. Thank you, Chairman Costello and council members. Thank you for inviting us here today. My name is Pete Little. I'm Executive Director of the Parking Authority, and with me here today are Sandra Downs, who's the Chief Financial Officer for the Parking Authority, David Rhodes, General Counsel for the Parking Authority, and Vincent Thomas, Chief Operating Officer for the Parking Authority. So, the Parking Authority is tasked with managing the city's on-street and off-street parking assets. So we manage the city-owned parking garages and parking lots. We also are in charge of the city's parking meter program, and both determining where meters should go, hours, rates, etc., and then maintenance of those parking meters. We also administer the city's residential permit parking programs, and there are now 47 of them altogether within the city. We also administer the Residential Reserved Handicap Parking Program. That's the program for residents who do not have any off-street parking options of their own, who have permanent mobility restricting disabilities and need a reserved space in front of their home. We also administer the valet parking regulations for the city and development of parking plans, and we also identify and implement parking demand management strategies such as car sharing. So some of our initiatives for this coming year, we will be replacing all of the remaining old mechanical single-space parking meters here within the city within fiscal year 2018 and replacing them with smart multi-space parking meters or the smart single-space parking meters that accept credit cards and debit cards. We'll also be expanding Project Space, which is our program to provide accessible on-street metered parking reserved for people with disabilities while curbing the theft and abuse of disability placards. We'll be expanding that program to Mount Vernon and to Hamden this coming fiscal year. We'll also be introducing pay-by-cell phone services here for parking meter charges within the city. And then we're going to continue to renovate and replace aging elevators at city-owned garages. And in this coming year, we'll be renovating the Marriott garage. We'll be replacing all of the elevators at our Market Center garage next to Lexington Market. And we'll be doing some concrete and expansion joint work at the Penn Station garage. And with that, open it up to questions.
Thank you, Mr. Little. We've been joined by Councilman Bill Henry from the 4th District, Vice Chair of the Committee, Councilman Leon Pinkett from the 7th District, Councilwoman Mary Pat Clark from the 14th District, and Karan Banks from the Mayor's Office. Councilman Henry?
Thank you. I'm sorry, I missed the orientation at the beginning of the day. How many questions do we get?
No.
2, sir.
Okay, all right, just checking. All right, I have two. If I think of others, I'll be happy to wait until after they're done. The first is, good morning.
Good morning.
Morning. What happened to selling the 5 garages?
I think that's on hold while it's being considered by the new administration.
Okay.
But that's where it is.
That's okay, right. So
Yep.
right, that was an easy one. Okay.
And it's actually 4 garages that we're recommending.
Oh, is it 4?
for sale.
I'm sorry.
Yep.
Okay. And the second one is, does the parking authority and, I guess it would be, do the parking authority and DOT ever collectively, proactively look at existing parking restrictions and propose alternatives? Like, is there anybody who is keeping track of the fact that right now there's a block of parking meters on the 400 block of Markland, and you're collecting almost nothing on them, such that you make a proactive suggestion to DOT that maybe this should be just 2-hour parking instead of metered parking, or maybe this shouldn't be restricted parking at all because no one's parking there.
Yep, actually, we do that all the time. And together and by ourselves as well, too. We formed actually a parking planning section a couple of years ago to be more proactive in doing exactly that. And we've actually removed parking meters from many blocks throughout the city. We've added parking meters on some other blocks as redevelopment happens in certain areas. And so it's really a constant.
So do you rely on DOT to keep the council involved in that, in those decisions?
No, we do.
Okay, you come, so,
Yep.
so if you, whenever those things happen, you come to the council.
Right. Typically, we'll notify the council member whose district it's in that we're either going to be removing parking meters or adding parking meters at a particular location.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Little, thank you for your service to the city. Actually, you partly answered one of my questions by saying that you're going to be introducing a pay-by-cell phone service. Do you think that will help the city save any money or make more money in recouping parking costs? Are we going to have less meters because we're now introducing the pay-by-cell phone service?
That's a good question. I know that some other cities have actually reduced the number of on-street parking meters they have as a result of pay-by-cell phone services. We're going to be cautious in that regard. We're going to keep parking meters on each block face where we have metered parking and not just make them pay-by-cell phone only, and primarily because so much of the population of the city and the surrounding area is unbanked, that they don't have credit cards or debit cards, and you need to connect those services to a credit card or a debit card in order to be able to use them. So we're going to need to continue to have parking meters that accept coins as well, too, as well as credit and debit cards in the near future. Beyond that, there's a possibility of saving money. I think it will help us to collect revenues, though, because it's providing yet another resource for people to be able to pay at the parking meter and not pay at the parking meter. So we'll see a little bit of additional parking meter revenue as a result of it.
But if I'm not mistaken, we have to pay for the service to take it by cell phone, right? Can you?
No, we won't be paying for that service.
So it's a free service that we're using?
Well, at the end of the day, if you decide that you want to use pay by cell phone in order to pay for your parking, there will be a service fee or a convenience fee that the customer pays for
Right.
that, but the city won't be paying.
But there's a vendor. We're going to be using a vendor for that? That's a vendor, correct? And we have to pay that vendor.
What we'll be doing is opening up for multiple vendors who are qualified to be able to pay, to be able to provide their services here in the city.
Right, yeah. I mean, that's my point. If you could provide for the council, like when you get to that point, I know we can't do it now because you don't have the contract, how much we're going to be paying that vendor and then how much we pay for the actual stanchions. Because like you, I believe that over time, we should remove, if we're going to have that ability, we should remove at least some of the actual parking meters because it kind of defeats the purpose to have that ability and be paying for the same service in two different ways, in my opinion. But I know we can talk about that in the future.
Sure.
My second question, we know that in the city we have reserved parking spaces for Zipcar and that service.
Yep.
Recently the new service Maven was introduced into the city. Are you going to be doing the same reserving parking spaces along corridors for Maven cars as well?
We are. Actually, we're working on, it's really a request for qualifications and interest for other firms to be able to offer their service to provide, some competition to Zipcar also. They would also be paying for, the right to reserve those spaces. And it'll be on as we can provide those services. So we aren't going to promise any vendors that they're going to be able to get spaces because in some neighborhoods we may not be able to, but we will be working with other vendors to provide that service too.
So how is that going to work where we have Zipcar specific spaces and now that there are other companies, are those Zipcar spaces going to have to be open up for bid or how's that going to work?
Well, no, we're looking to extend that agreement with Zipcar because they have provided a good service here in the city. They have close to 10,000 members altogether here in Baltimore City, and they have helped to reduce vehicle ownership here in the city, which has benefited parking and transportation. But we're going to be opening it up for other interested firms if they want to work with us as well, too, to provide that service in addition. So they won't be competing for the Zipcar spaces necessarily, but we'll be working with them to also provide the service.
Thank you.
Please.
So, so to clarify, so if right now there's 2 parking spaces on, excuse me, Councilwoman Clark, the 3200 block of St. Paul Street, if there's 2 Zipcar spots there and another service wants to come in, then you would be negotiating for taking another 2 parking spaces in the 3200 block of the same, like, so that the competitor for Zipcar can be right next to the Zipcar spaces?
If in fact they want to locate cars there, they may decide that that's not a good neighborhood for their particular service, so they may not. If they do, then we'll work through the same process we have with Zipcar to determine if those spaces can be provided to them. If it's in a block, you know, say the 3200 block of St. Paul, which busy commercial area as well too, we may decide that we can't really afford from a parking perspective to reserve 2 more spaces for another car sharing firm. We may look for an alternate place for them to place them outside of that area, but exactly that, we would work with them to identify the spaces where they might be able to provide the service.
So how long is the arrangement with Zipcar for?
Well, the current agreement runs out at the end of June.
Oh, okay. So conceivably, you could reach a point where just like every year or whatever, you have a certain number of spots that you've identified around the city that are available, and you could let however many services there are who are interested in using them bid for how much they want for these spots in different places.
No, not exactly that way. We're not going to open it up to bidding on the spaces every year because, you know, in fact, if you're a Zipcar member right now and say you're in Charles Village and you've become accustomed to those spaces being there, and that's part of the reason why you joined Zipcar, we don't necessarily want to swap out different vendors every year and have, you know, that confusion caused by that. So, you know, as long as Zipcar wanted to remain there in those spaces and we felt that those spaces could still be provided to them, they would continue to have those spaces there. But then if other vendors came along and decided that they wanted to offer their service as well too, we would work with them to find other spaces.
But even if the other service was willing to pay the city more for those spaces?
Well, we'll be looking to increase that fee with this new, that new request for qualifications and interest coming up.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
We've been joined by Councilman Yitzi Schleifer from the 5th District, Councilman Chris Burnett from the 8th District, Council President Jack Young, Kara Kuntz from the Council President's Office, and Karan Banks from the Mayor's Office. Councilwoman Middleton.
Oh, thank you. And hello there.
Hi, Councilwoman. Issue on our board, by the way. Yeah.
Thank you. I know that the Parking Authority has had success with Zipcar and the initiative with the handicap placards and so on. How far away are we from autonomous vehicles or driverless vehicles? I had an opportunity to go to a transportation peer leadership 2-day conference in Pittsburgh, and they really they're considered a smart city, and I had an opportunity to go to Carnegie Mellon that really had the push, and they're working with, I guess, Uber, and Uber has some driverless vehicles that pick up I mean, it was truly amazing. So how far away are we from that type of technology, which is something that, you know, it helps to keep vehicles off the streets. Of course, our city is really getting very crowded with vehicles, and I just like to know, or have you had conversation with, you know, the future of driverless vehicles in any form?
Yeah, we've certainly kept up with what's happening in terms of driverless vehicles, and I know in Pittsburgh they're actually doing that pilot program of Uber's autonomous vehicles there to determine, you know, what sort of impacts it's going to have. From what folks within the industry say right now, it's probably 10 years off before it becomes really ubiquitous, those driverless vehicles. But, you know, we're already taking a look at how that's going to affect parking demand, and both off-street parking demand, on-street parking demand, what other changes might need to be made if, in fact, there is that marriage between autonomous vehicles and those on-call services like Uber or Lyft, and what that means in terms of especially how we manage on-street parking and providing those loading zones, because you know, that'll be what's needed, are loading zones if folks are being dropped off and picked up by driverless vehicles. And then, you know, how our monetization structure may need to change from on-street paid parking to some form of monetization of that provision of loading and unloading zones. So yes, we are keeping close eyes on that and how it's going to affect parking. But a lot of folks have said that it'll probably be 10 years before it becomes ubiquitous enough that, you know, that there actually has to be some sort of structure in place to handle it.
And then the last question, have you included some more spots for increased bike racks throughout the city? You know, I know there were some increased ones around Penn Station. Is that increasing? Have you added more, or you plan to add more in certain places?
Yeah, there we work with Department of Transportation, and especially with the bike share program and identifying spots for the bike share program. But we also work with them to identify bike parking and creation of a few of those bike parking corrals as well. Yep.
Thank you.
Councilman Stokes?
Mr. Beat, I just have a question. When you install the bike racks, I get a lot of calls from businesses that they're not informed, and a lot of them have drop-off points where they deliver their food, their vendors. So is there any way we can make sure if there's a business district, somehow let them know? Because some parts of my district, the bike rack just showed up.
You mean for the bike share program?
Bike share, yeah.
Yeah,
So,
that would be Department of Transportation. That's their program. But we can certainly convey that to them, that they need to make sure that they inform
okay,
businesses.
I'll share that with them too. Thanks.
Yep, sure.
Councilman Dorsey?
Thank you. I'm wondering, how do we value RPP spaces?
How do we value RPP spaces?
Yeah, and how does that compare to how we value other spaces like zip car spaces?
Well, we really haven't put a dollar value on residential permit parking spaces. The only thing that we charge for there is for the actual permits for RPP. And there, that cost has remained the same for close to 15 years now altogether at $20 per permit. And there, we really look to recoup our administrative costs to administer the RPP programs throughout the city, and those permit fees essentially do cover our administrative costs.
Is there any other philosophy about that the parking authority might consider ascribing to? I mean, I know that other cities charge significantly more for residential parking permits, and that's based on a broader kind of philosophy of the negative impacts of parking in cities.
We certainly have taken a look at it, and we've actually worked, excuse me, we've worked with the Residential Permit Parking Advisory Board, which is a board that's set in code in the RPP section, to explore those other options for the pricing of the permits. And been a lot of debate about it, but no conclusions. But we're certainly open to other thoughts about how the permits should be, what the rate should be for the permits.
I have other questions, but they're more specific to my district. I did want to follow up. Who is actually responsible to notify council members of changes in the parking in their district? Because recently, I think I contacted you about a whole bunch of parking meters being removed on Hartford Road, and for reasons that made sense because they were underutilized.
Right.
I was never notified.
Yeah, that is our, for parking meters specifically, if they're to be removed or to be placed in a particular district, that is our responsibility in our planning section. So if you were not notified, I apologize for that, but that is our responsibility. In terms of some other parking changes,
Whose responsibility?
our parking planning section.
Okay.
Yep. Should notify if parking meters are being removed or they're being added. In terms of other parking changes, Department of Transportation, Department of Public Works, other departments are involved in, creating no parking areas, sometimes the police department even. And so that may vary, and sometimes we aren't always notified immediately either. So it could be various agencies, but when it comes to parking meters, we're responsible for them.
Okay.
Councilman Dorsey, I just wanted to add the advisory board that Mr. Little mentioned. I actually served on that for about 3 years prior to joining the council and led that analysis of what's done in other cities. And I can tell you that the Parking Authority has a great relationship with that advisory board. They work very closely with them and do take their suggestions pretty seriously. We looked at 105 or 110 cities throughout the country in terms of population, and even a few international cities to look at all these different models. But just to corroborate what Pete's saying, there really was no conclusion at the end of that. But it was certainly an interesting exercise to see what's being done throughout the country. There's a lot of different models for it. So
Yeah, I'd love to look more into that.
Sure, and a lot of work done by you. Thank you, Councilman, in terms of that analysis.
Council President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Pete. How you doing today?
I'm doing well.
All right.
How are you, Council President?
I just have a couple questions. One is not a question. It's just asking you to provide to the Budget Committee a list of your staff, vacancies, and salary costs for the Parking Authority, because that's not really in this book. And the question that I have is, have we utilized advertisement in our parking facilities to raise more revenue? Have we looked at that? I know we talked about it before, but that's added revenue that we can use if we sell advertisement to various companies. Have we looked at that?
We certainly have. We've looked at it probably a half a dozen times in the 13 years that I've been with the Parking Authority, and explored options as either part of a package, a municipal advertising package for the city as a whole, or for the garages separately. To be quite frank, there hasn't been a lot of interest from the outside sector in advertising and paying for advertising in the garages in the past, but that doesn't mean that there might not be in the future. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if I'm speaking out of turn, but I know that the city is taking another look at advertising as a whole and opportunities for generating revenue for advertising as a whole, including parking facilities.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. And the other question that I had, was not a question, it's a comment for Councilman Dorsey. Because of the inefficiencies in most of our agencies, they don't even contact any of us when they're doing work. They did work on my own block and had signs up for us not to park in my own block. And I'm the president of City Council, and nobody notified me. So as a council, we need to put policies and procedures in place that they notify us when stuff are going on in our district. So when people call us and ask us what agency is doing what, we can't even tell them. You know, and it's sad that that happens. So I know you've been doing a pretty good job of notifying, my office of when things are about to take place, and more agencies should follow the lead of the Parking Authority, because Councilman Ryan, I do think that they give out good and accurate information, but they're not responsible for transportation, public works, and all the other agencies who choose not to alert this council of when things are going on, when they shut down streets, and we get the calls. And sometimes I'll ask, well, do you know what agency it was? It's the city. I said, what color was the truck? It was white. I mean, most of them have the same color trucks. So it's hard for us to try to track that stuff down. So as a council, we're going to look at some policies and procedures that each agency must follow to notify us when work is being done in our respective districts. Thank you.
Thank you.
Karan, that number 12 was Council President's request, which was the number of, submit a list of staff and vacancies, salary save positions. Did I get that right, Mr. President? Pete, if you could follow up after with Marguerite. I know you started at number 12, but we're just numbering them incrementally throughout the budget hearings. Colleagues, anyone? Councilman Dorsey?
Thank you. Does the parking authority track the location, of registration of the vehicles that, whose owners have like monthly passes or whatever, yearly parking permits?
Well, in order to get a residential parking
No,
permit.
no, for parking garages, I'm sorry.
Oh, for the garages.
Yes.
Do we track the registration of
Yeah,
them?
like the jurisdiction of registration?
No, we do not.
No.
No. And, well, if you sign up as a monthly contract parker with the parking authority at one of the city-owned garages, we do get your license plate, but that's primarily so that if you leave your lights on or there's some other emergency, we can take a look at that license plate and then contact you through the contact information you provided in order to notify you if you've left your lights on or if there's some other emergency and your car needs to be moved. But we don't really ask then, you know, and we do get home addresses for monthly contracts, but for transient parkers, we don't collect that.
That's what
sort
I
of-
mean for monthly parkers.
We do collect that license plate information, and then they'll oftentimes provide us with their address, but oftentimes it's their billing address and not their residential address.
I got you. I just ask because I know that there's a correlation between kind of, you know, 2/3 of our daily workforce in the city is coming in from outside of the city, and that takes a toll on the city in a lot of different ways. And there's a correlation between that and the funding of the circulator and other things. I think it's really important for us to utilize tools to track who's coming in and out of the city and the impacts that it takes, and how we could perhaps financially incentivize people not living outside of the city and taking individual cars in. So I'm curious how we might be able to use that information in the future.
Yeah,
Thank you.
sure. Unless it's their business address. Yeah, many of them are. Yeah,
Thank you.
sure.
Councilman Schleifer?
Good morning, Mr. Little. I don't think we've ever met face-to-face, but I did want to thank you for your assistance back in December. I don't know if you remember those frantic emails that I received from an organization that was having an event downtown, and there were some signs that were just thrown up for an event that had occurred in the past. And overnight, actually, you were able to resolve it, so I appreciate that.
You're welcome. Yep, my pleasure.
Colleagues, anyone else? Mr. Little, thank you very much. It is an absolute pleasure to work with you
Council
guys.
members.
Your team is fantastic, in my humble opinion, and is one of the highest functioning agencies in the city. Thank you.
Thank you,
We're going to go
Councilman.
into recess until 11:30 sharp, and we will have Department of General Services